Hello and welcome to another episode of Intentionally Act Live. I'm Enrico Imanalo here with Dr. Thomas RaShad Easley. Thomas, what do minds and hearts have to do with diversity?
Need to incorporate both thinking and feeling at the same time while going through either interesting, good, or difficult circumstances. So when both are engaged, you can still talk, you can still work through, you can check yourself at the same time while listening to the individual or individuals that you are meeting with or that you're engaging with. Mind hearts.
Nice. I really, really like that. So before we get any further, let me introduce you a little bit to our audience. So I'm here with Dr. Thomas R. Easley, and he's spent most of his career as a diversity professional. As a diversity professional, he's focused on the recruitment, retention, and diverse talent in natural resource disciplines. Prior to launching Mind Heart for Prior to launching Mind Heart for Diversity Consulting LLC, Dr. Easley was the inaugural assistant dean of community and inclusion in the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies at Yale University. He also served as the inaugural diversity director of the College of Natural Resources at NC State University. As a professor, Easley has designed numerous courses and now teaches a course on diversity and environmental justice. Easley is also a musician who goes by the name Rashad in that world and describes his music as Save Your Life music, which incorporates messages of love, embracing the self, and helping others. Dr. Easley's book, recently published by Dio Press, is titled Mind Heart for Diversity and is available at major retailers. So, Thomas, how are you today?
I'm doing very well today on this lovely Friday. How are you doing, Enrico?
I'm doing very well. It's shaping up to be a beautiful day. The sun is actually rising here in California now, which is great. Although you know what, before I moved out here, I thought that California was like always sunny and warm, but
Mhm.
actually, it's a lot like New England. It's just less gray, which I very much appreciate.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So first question that I tend to ask most guests is,
Yes.
what made you fall in love with what you do? And I understand, definitely from the intro that there are several loves in your life. You've got music, you've got uh, natural resources, but you've also got diversity. So I don't
Right.
know where you want to start, but
And well, you said the three, so I'll start first with music. The love of music for me stems. Well, one was my grandmother. My grandmother played the piano. As a matter of fact, on her my grandfather's marriage license, that was her occupation. That she was a
really,
pianist. Yeah. And they got married like in the early 1900s. So
yeah.
that's how efficient and proficient she was. That they acknowledged that
Wow.
then. So my love started with her. My grandfather was a singer. My uncle, Reverend Dr. James Orange, please people look him up. He was one of the big leaders in the civil rights movement. He was the first field
Wow.
lieutenant appointed by Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement. And many of the chants that they sang at that time, like not this one, but like "We Shall Overcome." My uncle was an author of those as
Really?
while he was organizing youth, to push to push for the right to vote. And then my mother is a great singer, and my father loves music, and my sister and I both played the trombone. So I came up in a musical family, but
Yeah.
also came up in an activist family, and I came up in a family that was also a nature family. My grandparents had gardens in the backyard in like the biggest city in Alabama, Birmingham, but I didn't feel a lot of times like I was in the city. I felt like I was like, as some would say, in the country or rural, settings, because that's how they made it. So my love for music starts with my family. My love for the outdoors really also starts with my family because I was gardening with my grandma and my grandfather and my father, who I'm named after. He was I want to make sure I don't say excuse me, but he became a scoutmaster with the troop that I was a scout in, and I am an Eagle Scout.
Oh,
So,
really? You're
so
only
he.
like the third Eagle Scout I've met in my life, and that's
Oh.
a really impressive achievement. So for people who don't know,
Mhm.
I forget how many merit badges do you have to earn to earn Eagle?
It's changed. I mean, it's changed over time. Like you have different stages: first class, second
Yeah.
class life, and then you have the Eagle Scout. And then we have other aspects of scouting that we can be a part of, kind of like our own little, I'll say it like a secret society, like that we have in scouting. But I'll admit, I do not remember how many. I think it was like probably 50 or something or more. Now, I'm sure it's more because I had a lot. Like I had a whole SAS three. I was covered, and I had links on my belt. I had on my shirt. I still got that shirt, as a matter of fact, because I used to weigh like 300 pounds when I was younger.
I
That
still
was at
can't
my
believe that.
heaviest. And now I can still wear my clothes when now I can wear. I lost 137 pounds, so I can now wear what
Incredible.
I had in high school if I wanted to. But that's scouting, so that's outdoors,
Yeah.
and then forestry. Forestry, I have to credit Alabama A&M in particular. That's my undergrad institution that I went to. Historical Black University, the only one in the country that puts out at least 66% of the Black foresters that are in the Forest Service, and
Wow.
we our output is brilliant Black foresters in the world. Like my institution is the only one that still does that. And I'm saying that one to brag, but I'm saying that also to challenge. Like, hello, other schools you can join in. We don't have to be the only one that's like doing all this greatness. But that's Alabama A&M, the Bulldogs. So I credit them for helping me develop my love for forestry. And then diversity, and I'm almost done because that's the last one, is diversity. I credit Iowa State, go Cyclones in particular, for that, because when I got to Iowa State, I was just finished, working with the Forest Service, and this is after my BS, Bachelor's of Science degree in forestry, and I was a staunch forester. Man, just put me in the lab and leave me alone, or put me in the forest, and I don't want to be around people. But while there, Dr. Robert K. Perkins, Kelvin Perkins, he's a professor at Norfolk State, ended up becoming the head of the McNair program. It's a post baccalaureate program that helps low income people who come from low income backgrounds. I don't want to say that because we're not low income.
Right.
I'm a person,
Yeah.
but people who who grew up with a lower socioeconomic status, or of course, come from identities that have been marginalized. The aim is
Sure.
to help people get into the doctoral program, and it's named after Dr. Ronald E. McNair, who passed on the Explorer. I think that was the name of the rocket that exploded in the 80s. I remember being
Oh,
a
yeah.
child watching that
The
and
one
not
with Kristen
knowing.
McAuliffe, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
so
and not
she's from
knowing
New
that he was on
Hampshire
that.
like me, and that was a
That's
huge
right.
deal.
And he's from North Carolina.
Yeah.
Dr. McNair is from Greensboro, North Carolina. He went to North Carolina, and maybe not Greensboro, but he went to North Carolina A&T. So he
Mm.
also went to an HBCU, and he was an engineer. And I got to be in that program, and I was fortunate, and I say fortunate, that I had 12 students my first year. All of my students, English was their second language. Most of my students, they were
Oh,
either from Puerto Rico,
yeah.
I even had a student from Cuba, or maybe some other part, like say of Latin America, and so they helped me. I asked them if I could speak Spanish with them because I needed to learn because I
Yeah.
didn't know, and they could speak whatever they wanted with me. So I didn't say speaking, no, speak whatever you want with me. And
Yeah.
I said, but I had to make a deal with you. I said the deal is you leave the crap with me, and then you take the truth that I know about you back to your classes. The crap is you didn't earn your way in here. The crap is you're an affirmative action case. The crap is you don't belong here. I said, you leave that with me, and then you go out there and do what I know you can do. And I was the one counselor. All of my students ended up going to grad school that year. All of them. I had all of them. And that's the aim. The aim is for them to go and get a doctorate, really.
Yeah.
So I was there for 2.5 years. So I did it again the next year. They gave me more students, mostly Latinx again, which was fine with me, and some black, a couple of black students. This time I had 50. I went from 12 to 15 students. It
Wow.
happened again the next year. Everybody did it again. And that's what helped me go, wait a minute. Or it started me thinking, oh, I'm pretty good with people. Oh, maybe I can help people.
You
You
came
know,
out of the forest at that moment. Is that what I'm hearing?
yeah, yeah. You know what? I'm gonna add a word because I'm a former pastor too. I came out of the wilderness. Like it was like I came out and was like awake, like, oh, this is how my ministry starts. Oh, this, and seriously, that's when everything started skyrocketing. When I started
Wow.
engaging with people, because that's when I didn't know that I was good with
Yeah.
people, and so I'm very sensitive about other people's needs. I'm not perfect. I don't want people to think that, but I anyone who feels like they have a lower voice or don't have a voice, if I can, I'd like to be a support for them. Like when I can, if I have the resources, I will stay. Help me to see that. Help me to recognize. And really, Iowa State is what brought everything back, because Iowa State is when I started performing live and touring
Yeah.
around the country. So music came back. Iowa State is where I went deeper into forest genetics, which got me into forestry. Like that's where I
Wow.
entered, tree engineering. And then it also got me back into activism, because that all comes from my family. My uncle Sonny James Orange, that's how he was. I remember at his funeral in '08, it just blew me away how many different people were there. I was like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, I know he's from Birmingham. He lived in Atlanta. I said, but are those monks? I'm like looking at my cousin, are those monks here? And I know that he was an advocate for all people's rights. So it makes sense why we have so many LGBTQIA people here too. Like I was just
Yeah.
like, and then civil rights, right? I was like, but look at all these white people that are here. And look at these Asian people. So that told me, oh, and also women, a lot, all these women who were felt comfortable and safe with my uncle. So that taught me a lot in children. So he crossed the lines to me that brings people together, and that's where my love came from. So it still goes back to my family. I'm happy for my family every day.
Yeah, no, that's really, really wonderful to hear, and there's so much in there. I mean, just kind of going back to what you brought up about the civil rights chants, I I've wondered on a number of occasions, like, oh well, everybody seemed to know these chants somehow. Maybe there was a stockpile somewhere that they were just pulling from, trying out different ones. I had no idea, but it
Hmm.
makes sense that somebody would actually be sitting there writing them out, or figuring out what's going to work.
Hmm.
And when I moved into this apartment, actually, I had a series of plumbing issues and then some electrical issues, and
Hmm.
that really helped me to understand, or to realize once again, oh, you know what? I have no idea how a lot of the world functions, a lot of the world that I just take for granted.
Hmm.
And slipping that pair of glasses on and looking around, it's really humbling, because it's like, oh, I have no idea how that works. There's a whole supply chain that's a complete mystery to me
Yep.
associated with this. And
Hmm.
you and we work with people to push back against diversity, and I
Yep.
realize it's easy for me to also forget that to many other people, racism is also kind of a mysterious force. They don't know where it originates from, how it gets woven into all of the different aspects of human life, and
Hmm.
how it became this huge problem that we all essentially can't afford to ignore any longer.
Right.
And as I said, that's humbling, because when you get used to doing something all the time, you get kind of comfortable. And when you get
Hmm.
comfortable, you stop making all the connections and seeing the opportunities. And when it comes to really big challenges like racism, that's a huge issue,
Hmm.
right? And I think
Hmm.
crucial to
Hmm.
that is kind of the internal work, right? A lot of times we look at things externally. Oh,
Hmm.
that problem is over there. That thing that I disagree with exists outside of myself. There's nothing I can do about it. Life is just kind of happening to me. But
Hmm.
as you kind of referenced in telling us about how you fell in love with the various things in your life, things don't just happen to people, right? It's
Hmm.
people being intentional. And so I'm kind of very curious to learn from you. Given your really rich background and set of experiences, what have you found that it really takes for people to kind of do the work? As people like to say, of DEI, anti-racism, and advancing racial equity. So, like, what do we have to do internally to do that work well?
Well, to do the work of anti-racism work, I think the first thing is you have to learn about race. Okay, that's the first thing. I think that's one of the big things that many folks, not everybody, but that's one of the reasons why people struggle with it. It's because they don't go and learn, like they don't want to learn. It's just like me being a cisgendered male. If I continue to offend women, man, maybe you should go learn something about like sexism, and learn like how it works and how not to do it, and go and learn. So the next thing is you have to have a willingness. I think it's great to have a willingness to want to learn. So then you're not resisting what you're learning. Um, Eric Erickson as well as Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum talk about social identity development. And when you
Yeah.
first learn things, you have the active passive resistance, then the active passive acceptance, then the immersion, then internalization. So really those phases are what people have to go through. As you learn something, you accept it, maybe you reject it, but to me, it's not wrong to accept or reject. It's great doing both, just but wrestle with it. So
Yeah.
then the other thing that people do, and this is where the immersion, which leads to internalization, is applied to yourself. And I think that that's another thing that people struggle with is how do I apply this understanding of race, this philosophy, or the inertia? Because it really
Yeah.
it is a lot of pressure, and it can lead to confusion. It can also contribute to pride if you really know how to
Yeah.
analyze it. But the other thing that's interesting about race, and the reason I say confusing is because when people study, and race has been with us for at least 500 years. Okay, at least 500 years. So I say at least because colorism is in every community.
Right.
Okay,
Endemic.
hey, and so, but the way that race was instituted in the United States, or as I like to say, the divided states, or if it's my grandfather was still alive, he would say Turtle Island, because that's the name that that my ancestors called this place, 100 years ago or less. And he so I'm sorry. So he would call it that. But I think that in the 1500s, race was, at least in this country, becoming. It was more like an ideology that was developing. In
Hmm.
the 1600s, you start seeing more like well, not legalities, but academics
Hmm.
questioning it. In particular, Harvard did a really good job of that, and Yale did. But we can talk about them on another, interview. And then religious, as a pastor, you saw it
Yeah.
happening in the church. By the time you get to the 1700s, now there's some legalism that's trying to be developed around it. In the 1800s, and there's scholarship being written about it, everything from Darwin to Leiden, comparing black people to apes, and
Yeah.
your mind, your brain is this shape, all of that. So now you get to the 1800s and the 1900s, and what's fascinating is it's really 1790 is the first census that was made, and in that time, it was only black and white. Those were the only options. It's not
Right.
until the 1860s you have American Indian. It's not until the 1930s you start having like people of really, definitely, like of Asian background that is now being recognized. In the 1960s is when people could then identify as they wanted, and it's not until the 2000s you have all of these other all of these other
Yeah.
identities. So that's the other thing about race is that it can be confusing, and when people study enough, and I'm never going to be, and I'm not an anti-black person and get away from Africa. I'm not like that. I actually think that's one of the issues though, is that there
Yeah.
are many people who want to get away from black. It's like
Mm.
and they
Right.
kind of want to stay away from Africa,
Yeah.
and they don't want to be a part of that, even though
Yeah.
science at least has shown that the first individuals came from there. But
But
we're
you're
all,
right. It's like
but we're here,
yeah, it's like
you
a
know?
reflexive thing, right?
Yeah.
To recoil from blackness. Oh, I'm not like
Yeah.
those horrible stereotypes.
Hmm.
But in doing so, again, I'm not you. Well, we can see clearly how that separation begins. And when the
Hmm.
dynamic becomes, I'm not you, the other
Hmm.
side of that is you are them.
You're them. Right.
And when you're them, you're competing
Hmm.
over scarce resources. And now,
Yeah.
ooh,
Hmm. Hmm.
so I do have a comment that's come in by
Okay.
a lady Lawrence Carty, and here's the
Okay.
question. I'm from Roxbury, so Thomas, that's an area of Boston. One topic I especially hope to hear about this morning is how to help a fellow Black person realize that they are acting the gatekeeper role to keep us, quote, in our place as Black people. Black person speaks up to challenge the white privilege pattern, and the Black gatekeeper tells them you are out of order and must respect authority. Then the
Ah.
white people can praise her for, quote, doing a good job or say she must be, quote, respected instead of telling us directly we must not be, oh, running over. In one's
Okay.
workspace, there is attention. Maybe
Oh,
that comment didn't load 100%. Let me see if I can get that from Miles real quick.
okay.
Um, yes, and I think there was a topic request as well.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, this is an also on Lady
There it
Lawrence
is.
Hardy's mind. In one's workspace, there is a tension between speaking up and economic security that makes this question much more significant in terms of surviving in the job space economically.
Hmm.
Ooh, wow.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
Lady Lawrence Cardy, thank you so
Thank you
much.
for that. All right.
Oh, and
I think I can
she
address
just
that.
added, we must not be uppity. So,
Uppity. Yeah, I got yeah. Okay, let me address that, but I just need to finish one other thing just
yeah,
with the race
please.
conversation about the race. The reason why I go into the race to answer because I was actually answering your question about what must we do. You see how I had that deep exploration of race?
Yeah,
So so then if I talk to someone who's indigenous and then I tell them that I identify as indigenous too, now there's a conversation. Some people may want to deal with how much and all of that. And then that's when I remind them that's the actual trick right there. I said, that's the trick right there. Like the one drop, the black blood. Obama was the first black president. How can that be
yeah,
when his mother's white? So it's like, no, so it's like right there, I have to remind people that even the way that we deal with this race dynamic, is very confusing and really is wrong because it separates us. You see, the way that I like to discuss race is bring us together without trying to conflate that, oh, we're all the same when we're not.
yeah,
Like I recognize that we're different, and so, but knowing my own history, so is how I can communicate. So being that I know more of my history, I know about race, I can communicate about it. I'm not uncomfortable talking about it. And I think that's what people who struggle with it, they need to learn how to apply to themselves in particular. Because there's some people who don't look at themselves as a race. And then
yeah.
other people who
That's
think about
true.
race all the time because of our existence. Hence, to this point that we just had, this question about black people, speaking up to challenge, white privilege or the white privilege pattern and the black person operating as a gatekeeper. Now, I like the terminology gatekeeper, similar like what they had like in the like during slavery times, or or when enslaved Africans as well as indigenous people were enslaved, as well as
Yeah,
Latinx, as we say now, who was struggling. And then of course we brought our Asian family over, and then they had the camps and everything. I always tell people oppression is a learned behavior actually.
right.
And so in slavery times you had people who were like, some may say, the house slaves or the house Negroes, or the people who kind of who protect the establishment, and they make sure that other people don't get out of, like that, they don't act up.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you help a black person understand that? Well, one, I think that I think it's best if you can, is to as best you can, maybe try to understand why they're doing it. Okay,
Mm.
and so that's why I like to talk about human nature. Many people are probably doing, like, people are protecting the establishment in a place of work, one, because they think that that's what they're supposed to do. A number of people are afraid of challenging the establishment. They may not know
Yeah.
that they're a protected class. They may not know what their rights are, so they go along with everything. And then some people were raised that that's just what you do. You don't push. Remember, we even though we're in the 21st century, my mother is still alive, and I'm thankful for that. And my father, I bring that up to say this: they never thought that they would see a biracial president of the
Yeah.
United
Right.
States when they were my age. And I'm
Sure.
43, 43. I'm 43. So they never imagined that. So now imagine when Obama won, someone like me who's going to be a little bit more cool, because I'm like, well, he's still a politician, mom, but it's cool. But I'm glad he won.
Yeah.
But people of a different generation are ecstatic because they're like, oh my goodness, you see, because they also think that because they don't understand how power works, and they may not understand politics, but they do understand something about representation.
Yeah.
And they know that, man, seeing him in that position, seeing First Lady Michelle Obama, like seeing that did do something for people. All right. So now you have the person who wants to challenge culture. Well, why do they want to challenge it? Now, the person who's challenging the culture or challenging white privilege, may be upset about something. They may not like what's going on, so they try to challenge it. The black person who, as this individual said, operates as a gatekeeper, goes no. So the other thing that they probably are saying no, because don't mess it up for us.
All right. Don't
You see
rock
what
the
I'm saying?
boat.
Don't rock the boat.
We're okay.
See,
Sorry, you're not
yeah.
okay. But
See, so I just gave you four scenarios that could be playing out with them. So the first thing, one, to be a gatekeeper against your own people. Okay, if you identify that that's my, like that we're in the same group, it ends up hurting you as well as hurting them.
yeah.
Okay, especially if they're not doing anything wrong. Like if they're just using their voice and they're trying to highlight something that is not, right. One of the things that we could do is maybe join with them, maybe help them with how to articulate this. I think also find out what the issue is. The other thing is, for the person who's saying we shouldn't push, I'm always curious what their position is. Like, are they in the leadership? Because also position plays a part into that too. It can be
Context is
very, very
everything. Yeah.
political. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Now, here's the thing about the pat on the back, because that part about, yeah, don't be uppity. I'm like, wait a minute. So when I'm in a place of work, I never let people give me the compliments that make me feel different or make me feel special. I just
Say
don't
more
do it.
about
Oh,
that.
years ago when I was at UGA, because I was an exchange student at UGA, while I was at Alabama A&M, and I did really great. I graduated from Alabama A&M. I go to this conference, Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Other Related Sciences. Mannerism, man-ars for short of manners. It's still around. I won't go to Atlanta for this job fair because I'm looking for a job. I'm trying to get a job. And my former dean at the time, he was there, and we go into the conference, and we are watching how all of the students are, and people are behaving, and they're partying, they're having a good time. It's a conference. It's at night. This is good.
Yeah.
I even participated in the talent show. I think I won it that year too, and I was there as a guest. I wasn't even there as a
You're
student.
so accomplished, you don't even remember.
Yeah, yeah, because I did win one year. I won 2 years. I won the talent show. Like, I actually did it. But my professor, he watched the way that I was basically managing myself, and he noticed that I wasn't doing what everyone else was doing. And he said this to me. He said, Thomas, you're different. You're not like everybody else, here. And I went, oh no, actually, Doc, I'm just like everybody else here. I just don't feel like dancing right now because it's 8 o'clock at night, and I'm okay. I danced 100 times already. I don't get off on this kind of stuff. I'm good. But I don't think that they're wrong for having a good time. It's at night. We're here. It's like a reunion. In our community, we like to party when we feel safe and comfortable. We have a cookout, you see. So the thing is that I couldn't let him think that I thought that I was different than everybody else. And I also
That's
couldn't let
interesting.
him get away with saying that to me because I'm not different than everybody else. You're not boosting my ego, making a comment like that. Okay, back to this example. So when I'm in a place of work, this is what I say in my head. People compliment you, you get awards. It's biased. You get awards because they value what you're doing. No, never. I never allow myself to just get an award because I think I'm that great.
Right.
I'm smart. I'm good. Yeah, yeah. I like to. I do good work, but I never go. Yes. Wow, I'm outstanding. I'm great. I'm like, no, no. Maybe
My own
they.
hype. I love it.
Yeah, maybe they like that because it benefits them. So that's how it doesn't
That's
go to my head.
true.
All right. Now I
Yeah.
can easily see white privilege. I can easily see male privilege. I can easily see age. I can easily see it all. So when I see one thing, I don't go, "Ooh, let me jump on that." I go, "Okay," because I saw this too, and I saw this too. So
Right.
now I'm a black person at a place, and I have had to do this in both the roles that you referenced. Is that when I step up and I try to use my voice, sometimes people would tell me, "Hey, Thomas, hey man, like, don't do that. Hey,
Right.
you have to calm down." And I would tell, and some people, depending on where I was or at the time, I would say, technically it's because of you I have to work so hard. I would remind them of that, and they go, "Why?" I like, well, you can't have one black person using their voice and another black person scared to use their voice. I said, because it's going to make you look great to them. Technically, you think, and it's also going to make you feel good because they're not on you. But what I do know is conflict is just an idea rising to the surface, and we actually don't grow without conflict. So
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of confrontation. I don't mind pushing culture, but if you're going to be, if you're going to be, I'm gonna say words that people may not like. If you're going to be a loudmouth, if you're going to complain, make sure that you're exemplary. That's one of the things that I always tell people. If you're going to do it, make sure you're doing your job great. To me, that's the best protection that you can have. And know your
Yeah.
rights. Not don't do this because it's going to make it look bad for us. No, you know your rights and know what you're doing and know why you're doing it. That's the other thing
Right.
I say. Know why you're doing it.
And I mean, to some people listening, that might sound scary, right? Oh, if
Mm,
I want to open my mouth, be exemplary, but
mhm,
you don't have to. There are differences in scale, right? You can
mhm,
open your mouth in lower risk situations.
yep,
If you're not comfortable doing this in higher risk situations, maybe one of the things that we can do is support the people that feel comfortable enough to do that in those higher risk situations, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
doing the work, a lot of people have this mental image of protesting, of showing up angry, of making demands.
mhm,
But
mhm,
this is, if we think about the changes that we've witnessed in our own lives,
Mhm.
A lot of the largest changes don't come from people simply being angry or speaking up. It's doing a lot of very small things across a sustained period of time.
Yeah.
And that is what creates the momentum for change. We're
Mhm.
so used to consuming things and hitting the big red button to get what we want.
Mhm.
And that absolutely is our enemy in this situation. And
Yeah.
yeah, to your point, that takes a lot of self-management to not hit the big red button, to get that dopamine hit, right? To
Right. Right.
defer our immediate pleasure in the hopes and with the optimism that we are moving towards something better. So thank you
Mhm.
for those that very detailed answer.
Mhm.
Um, and we have another commenter, and we got some great comments today. Thank you, everybody. So please
Okay.
do keep them coming. Sarah Coolsbergen, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. It says, "Good morning, everyone. I'm from New York City, but I live in Massachusetts. Thank you for organizing this meeting." Well, you're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Mhm.
I would like to learn more about anti-racism slash anti-oppression work. In addition, I would appreciate some advice about convincing white people to do anti-racism work.
Okay.
Thank you. And she has a follow-up, which is, hello again. I forgot to mention I am part of a grassroots coalition, and some of the members of the coalition seem to be resistant to or uncomfortable doing anti racism work. Most of the members, the coalition would probably identify as white.
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
what do you think about Sarah's questions and situation there, Thomas?
Well, one can you put it in the chat just so I can see it again? Because someone put it in the chat.
Absolutely.
I actually think Sarah's comments have to do with the last comment that you actually made, Enrico, when you were talking about change. Because I always tell people, big change is technically the easy change. It's the small changes that are the hard one. Because when you have a bunch of small ones, the big change flips. It's like, boom, here we go. But it takes time to do those small ones. And then, people say change is the only constant, and I was like, well, I'm like, well, yeah, things are changing. But the truth is, I think that, change, like change is constant. But I noticed that the kind of change that I look for within me, I noticed that the change that takes a long time is the decision. That's what takes the longest time, the decision to make the change. Once you make the decision, the action is quick. And so just getting people to that, which then brings me to Sarah's, question in particular about, I would like to learn more about anti-racism, anti-oppression work, and some advice about convincing white people to do anti-racism work. So one, I want to, so Sarah, thank you for the question and thank you for being here. It's the convince word that is tough for me. Okay.
That's where I
That's
got kind of hung up too.
Yeah, that's the just to be honest with you, that's the tough word. I don't really feel like I can well, no, that's not true. I can convince people to do things. If you listen to me long enough, listen to my song Confidence. For real, listen to my song Confidence. I explain why a lot of people get elected the way that they get elected. Because if you sound like you know what you're talking about, most people jump on that bandwagon, and that's regardless of who you support or who you believe. And so I don't work to convince or coerce people into doing anything with me, because in my opinion that
Yeah.
kind of leads to resentment, because it's not going to be
Yeah.
sustainable. It's like
And
I'm
that's a
pushing something down
spectrum,
the
by the
throat.
way, right?
And that's what.
That's a spectrum. So,
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
we've got persuasion, we've got
Yep.
convincing people, and at the
Hmm.
extreme end, we've got coercion. So
Hmm.
that can be a very hard line to walk.
Hmm.
And what we know is that people can't really be persuaded of things that they're not already kind of thinking about and open to.
Yep. Hmm.
And it's really when like coercion is a power-based move, right? So that's
Hmm.
forcing somebody to feel that way.
Yep.
And when we're engaging in the work of anti-oppression and anti-racism,
Hmm.
well, let's just think about that for a second. Do we want to be challenging power with similarly problematic dynamics? Personally, that's a choice that I've decided is not for me.
Yes,
Um,
likewise.
yeah, and if we were to kind of zoom out and think, well, why can't we just force everybody to think a certain way? Well, just
Hmm.
study that a little bit objectively,
Yeah.
right? It seems, well, some people might call it anti-American. They might call it authoritarian. They might call it
Hmm.
totalitarian.
Hmm.
And if we're trying to address our social problems that we've characterized along very similar lines by doing the same thing, well, that's when a revolution becomes a revolving door.
Yes. Yeah. So I see, and this is why I think the best way to, to do, what, like what our leader just put in this chat is, first, you, I think it's important to be able to demonstrate what you want other people to do. See, I don't go into a workplace and go, and I can only say I on this one. I don't go into a workplace and go, I'm going to change this around and I'm going to make them do this. I'm like, no. One, I go into a workplace and I go, man, how long am I going to be here? How long am I going to be here? That's for real. That's the first thing I'm thinking. How long am I
That's
going
so
to be
real.
here? Like how long do I think I'm going to be here? What are my deal breakers? Treat it like a relationship.
Yeah.
What are my deal breakers? One of the things that are going to make me say I leave here, I quit. I'm done. So I think about all of that first. I primarily focus internal. That's where I focus most of my attention. And I think that's why I get the most work done and why I think I've been the most successful in diversity is because I really don't make it about other people. I make it about myself.
Right.
And I go, okay, because the more I learn about others, I really learn about myself.
Yeah.
So, and so that's why the word convince, why I wanted to start with
Yeah.
that, because if someone thought that they could convince me, I would probably resist that, you
Yeah.
see. But if someone wants to work with me and help me and show me how to do something, one, because they're doing it. Okay,
Yeah.
see, so then that's the first thing, are we actually doing it? Like, I don't invite anyone to do anything with me that I haven't done. So that's the first thing. So because when or if you do something that I may think is wrong or maybe unwise, there are more than two ways, but there are two ways that I can handle it, right? I could come down on you like a hammer, okay? Or I could say, oh, wait a minute, let me see. Can I help you with that? Let me show you another way of doing that. See, now I can walk you through what I've done. And that's one of the challenging things about academia. That's why I tell people I'm
Mm.
not a person, I don't believe that everything should be data driven. I'm like, no, I definitely think things should be data informed.
Yeah.
Okay, because data driven, I was like, no, how was that data collected? Who did it? What questions were asked? What time? What's the content? So no, but inform me. So it's the same way with this work. One, be able to demonstrate with people, be able to be a guide with them. The other thing is, if you wear your emotions on your sleeve, you don't need to be doing this work, or you don't need to be leading in this work, because the whole point of this is to change and challenge what many people don't want to change.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's what a lot of us actually forget. It's
Yeah.
like, I walk into, like, for real, like, just to tell you, like, the event that I was at last night, for it,
Mhm.
a white woman, walked up to me, okay, said, I'm sitting in the whoop whoop section.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Right now, I know what woo woo is. It's a noise. You make noise, and
Yeah.
she's older. I can tell that she was probably about at least 20 years older than me. Woo
Okay.
woo. Okay. Now, if you under the age of 18, you might not know what that means. Arsenio Hall. See, that's the
That's where I
joy
know
of
it from.
aging. That's the joy of aging. That's why I warn people: 40s is not old. No, if 40s is
No.
old to you, you're ignorant. I said it. It's
Yeah.
you're ignorant, because I was ignorant for many years. I thought, man, 30s, oh, now I'm at 40, and I'm like, I'm living my best life. I didn't know the best years would become. But anyway,
Thomas,
so she
I'm
said, woo woo,
36 and I feel like a child, you know?
bring, look at me. You should see me when I'm running. But so she said, woo woo, and I'm like, all right, see, but all the references came back. Okay, Arsenio Hall, the
Right.
noise
Yeah.
making, we're making noise. Oh,
Oh.
you stereotyping me. You profiling me. I'm making noise. And
Yeah.
here's how I know there was a profile. One, she was drunk. And two, I was there silent the whole time. I'm for
So
real.
there was no woot woot section and there was no
No,
woot woot from you, period.
no. And I'm a commissioner. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm sitting near the secretary for our state. No, I'm not doing it. But I could have been like, what? No, I chose not to even engage this person. I said, I'm good. Eh, but some other people would have probably been agitated, ticked off about it, and I would get it. So here again, the reason I keep saying demonstrate is because I think that that's what people miss. Like, if you want people to change and shift, if that's what we want, then we got to be able to walk them through that.
Yeah. And
The
so
next thing,
I'm
oh,
sorry.
okay,
I
and then,
just
oh
wanted
yeah,
to
to
highlight
do.
that Sarah kind of has followed up, and I think it's very
Uh-huh.
much in line where I think you're about to go.
hmm I don't want to tell people what to do or to try to gain power. No, no, no. So here's the other thing. There's nothing wrong with gaining power. Oh, I do. I do want to gain power. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, I do. I want to gain power because I mean I know what power is, being able to make something happen. I don't think pursuing power is wrong. I think that because there's benevolent power. You're like you
Yeah.
people who want to give it away. Then you have the selfish. People who want to hold it. It's the same way like people say I don't want things to be transactional. Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah.
Everything's a
Sometimes.
transaction. What kind of transaction is it? So
Yeah.
it's like that's what it is. Like
Right.
what kind is this equal? Is this
And I
um
can't build a deep relationship with, say, like a gas station attendant that I might
yeah,
never pass by again, right? That's
right, right.
not a great
Right.
return on investment.
Yes. So to do anti-race, right? One thing is to understand the culture of race, because I want to answer this leader's question. One, race has a culture, just has a culture, and it does. How do you know? Well, answer this question: who decides when being late is? Who
Mm,
decides when I'm complaining versus asserting myself? Who
right.
decides when I've broken a rule or when I'm just moving along in a policy? Who decides? Okay,
Yeah.
and if you look
What's
at many
the date
policies.
today?
Right. And a lot of the policies, if you want to dig deep, if you get like deep in the minutia, a lot of them are entrenched in like racial dynamics, but most people don't know about it. It's like
Yeah.
folks don't know because, like I said, she said whoop whoop section. That's noisy. So if I'm in a place of work and people say things like you can't talk past a certain level, or if we're standing in a hallway, shh, don't say anything like, like don't disturb. And I'm like, okay, all right. But if I'm in a different environment, that's probably how people converse. Like I had a student when I was at Yale, African American student, and she was going off on a situation. She was mad, and we were in the hallway talking. And my dean, who identifies as white, or at the time, my former dean now, she walks by and she sees me and the student having this exchange, and she goes to the restroom and she came back by. And I watched her walk slowly as she passes, like, oh man. And she, so I want to give her credit. She thought that I was probably in danger or something
Sure.
like that. But see, remember people also project on you what they think about themselves.
Yeah.
I'm standing there calmly the whole time. So then she tries to kind of distract it and go, oh, there's someone waiting on you, Dr. Easley, or or Dean Easley, what she called me.
Trying to
And I said
help.
that's okay. Yeah, I said
Yeah.
appreciate that, Dean, but I said they can wait. Back to the student, kept talking. Okay, later Dean came to me and was like, I'm so sorry, Thomas, man, she was really going off on you and giving it to you. I said, no, she wasn't. She was just expressing how she felt.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, she wasn't attacking you? I was like, no, if she was attacking me, I wouldn't have stood there. If she was attacking me, I would have gone and got somebody. I would have gone and got you, or something like that. I would have said, hey, we need to do this different. See, so when you have the cultures in these spaces, and they clash, that's when the conflict happens. And then the
Yeah.
question is, how do we work through it? So understand that there's a culture around race. Okay. Make sure that you understand how you identify racially. Make sure that you go and learn the history around how race was instituted. Okay, now then ask yourself, why do I want to challenge it? Why do I want things to change? What do I want to change? What's
Yeah.
the end result that I want? And this is why I say this, because for me, I don't need everybody to be an anti-racist. I
Right.
don't I don't I don't need everybody to know about race for me to get my job done. I don't need everyone to be an anti-sexist. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
need that. But there are some people who think that that's what it takes in order for them or for me to
Right.
feel comfortable in doing this. And that's why I always remind people, check yourself and do your own, like check your own thermometer first.
Yeah.
Is it that I'm struggling with this? Do I want people to deal with this because it's going to make me feel better? Do I want people to deal with this so I feel like I have something to engage with?
Right.
And if it's all of that, then don't do the work. Don't
Yeah.
convince. You see, because now this is about you. It's not really about them.
You know what? I love that point. And as we were talking here, what crossed my mind is, oh, sometimes it's so hard for me to remember that racism isn't about me. Those awful things that people have said to my face, the behaviors that they've done to me, that wasn't
Mhm.
about me. That was about who they thought I was, or who they thought I should be based on their preconceived notions, right?
Right.
And so
You're right.
when we're approaching somebody to try to change their mind, we are saying, "Hey, racism's about you. and you're a problem. There's a dehumanizing element in that.
Even that, yeah.
There's a certain fundamental lack of respect for that person's humanity. We don't know where that person has been or where they are in their life. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm being really, really brutally honest with myself, I was not ready to engage in the work of anti-racism until I was probably 32 years old, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a long time. But
Right.
honestly, to your point, Thomas, I had no idea who I was or what I was doing or why I was doing it. I was just kind of reacting to things. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until then that I kind of realized, oh, I'm the only one that can kind of steer the ship of my life and make the decisions on where it goes. Are many of
Mm-hmm.
those decisions incredibly difficult, painful, inconvenient? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But if I'm not making them, somebody else is. And who is
Mm-hmm.
that?
Mm-hmm.
We don't always know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
in a world where we know that people extract things from each other for their own personal gain, one of the ways that
Mm-hmm.
we can protect ourselves is by making choices for ourselves in a very informed manner, taking the
Mm-hmm.
time, the time to learn about ourselves and process things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, thank you for answering Sarah's question. So, I guess another question that's on my mind is, let's say that we're engaging in the work of anti-racism, diversity, equity, inclusion, racial and social justice. How can we kind of check in on success, right? So we know that often success in our society looks like making money, getting fame, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're trying to do a very different thing with anti-racism and diversity, equity, inclusion, sometimes we get the sense that we're doing a lot of work, but can't really figure out exactly what the end result would look like. So, what
Mm-hmm.
does that look like for you, Dr. Easley?
Well, for successful anti-racist work, one is going to depend on the place, where I am. So, let's say if I'm in an organization and and race is the issue in a couple of ways. We don't have representation here in the organization, and people get offended, right? Okay, people have been offended. Excuse me, I should say that racially. People have been racially offended. One here again, I like to try to teach people about monoculture and multicultural, like how organizations were founded probably under
Yeah,
one vision, one person, one group, and now here we are, decade later, a year later, 100 years later, doesn't matter, and we're trying to make all of these, we're trying to make these changes, right? We're trying to turn mono into multi. We're trying to
right.
take something that was singular and make it plural, like, and we're doing it in a way, okay, that may not coalesce with people. This is so then, because Sarah's question was really powerful. It still ties
Yeah,
to what you're saying. I tell people it's about relationship. Okay, how can you make relationships and form relationships that benefit what you're doing, and let
hmm,
those relationships be the thermometer for how you're growing.
right.
So that's one way like that's one metric. Okay, are relationships expanding in the workplace? Are people feeling more comfortable speaking about things? Are doors opening up? Diversity is difference. Equity is everyone getting what they need to do what they need to do. Inclusion is hearing everybody's voice and people being able to challenge the culture without, consequences, or without fear of consequences. Usually, access is being able to get to what you need to get to.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you get to, there's so many other terms, right? There's justice, and we can keep going. But I think one sign of success is when more people are using their voice. I think another sign of success is when more people are being quiet. I think that's
Mm,
another sign. Okay,
okay.
because see, what ends up happening is leaders. Okay, so this is the normal, right? Something happens in a place, or something happens socially, like last year when Mr. Floyd was killed, which was after Ahmaud Arbery and after Breonna Taylor. And don't even get me started on that. But anyway, I just got myself started. Okay, so Mr. Floyd gets killed and is seen. All
Yeah,
right, companies, people in companies are like, I want our company to make a statement.
right.
I'm sorry, as a black person, I don't respect that. The same way as an indigenous person, I don't respect land acknowledgments. That's another that's
Yeah,
another conversation though. All right. And so I'm like, okay, all right, okay. So we need to do something. So then the leaders now have to do something, or they feel compelled to do something, or they're trying to react. Okay, so they either do something, they put out a statement, they do something. Okay, all right. Okay, so they put out a statement. But what is a statement? It's just words. It doesn't mean that we're actually doing something. All right. But what if a leader goes, no, we're not going to put out a statement, but we are going to start doing this work internally. And
Oh,
instead of us
very
putting a
different.
statement out, let's make the statement be our work. Our
Yeah.
work will be the statement. And what I want to do is I want to try to work with he, she, or they, a number of people who really care about this. And let's see, what do we need to change here in the company? So first, that means we need to do some research. What do we need to change?
Right.
Okay. So one sign of success is you're actually doing research, like you're digging, trying to figure something out. Okay. All
Right.
right.
So it's like a
Another
good
sign.
meal.
Yeah, yeah, right. Okay. Now the reason why I say people are being quiet. Okay, so when you're doing the research, and then let's say someone comes up with the idea, we need to do diversity training. A lot of times, it's someone saying we need to do diversity training for another group of people. That's usually what it is. The leaders are saying someone else needs it, but I'm like, the people who are in charge and empower control the culture. So technically, everyone needs it. So then another sign of success is when everyone is actively learning. Now, let me go back to the thing that I said about everyone being silent. The other sign of success for Thomas is when everyone gets something and everyone loses something. And that's the thing that most companies struggle with. How do you do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I'll say it again. Everyone gets something and everyone loses something.
Yeah.
That's equity. Like you want to know what equity, like that's equity. Like that's real. Because I
Yeah.
can see this, like this person got this and this person lost this. Now, but Thomas, what do people lose? And I'm not, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you should just lose everything. But when people say we want to institute DEI in our place, do they understand what does DEI do when we talk about hierarchy?
Yeah.
Remember, I just said diversity, equity, inclusion, access. See, there are things that we naturally do in our organization that if we really put DEI there, we may not do them. We may
Right.
not do them the same way. It may look different. So then the other thing, and that's why I said silent. So now the top person is also going, what would change for me if we're successful? And that's my ultimate sign of success when everyone is thinking about that. Like, oh
Mm.
man, how does this work? How will this work? So now that means that we're all in it trying to figure it out. And then to me, that's the ultimate sign of success is when we're all in it. Like we're
Yeah.
all trying to work on it. We're all confused. We all have something to share. We all have something to give, and that's real community.
Yeah. I really couldn't agree more. I
Hmm.
do want to address this other comment. So this one was addressed to me, again
Hmm.
from Lady Lawrence Carty. I'm
Hmm.
concerned that some white people, I identify as Black, might
Hmm.
misconstrue your answer to Sarah as an excuse to say that a Black person calling out the facts of racist/white privilege patterns as dehumanizing instead of speaking truth to power. Okay, so Lady Lawrence, I can certainly see where your concern comes from, and thank you for elevating this for us. Simply pointing out the truth is not dehumanizing. If the truth of racism in America makes one uncomfortable, they should put that energy into changing the things that upset them, not attack a Black person speaking truth. So, Lady Lawrence, I 100% agree with you. What I would add here is that, yes, speaking truth to power is not dehumanizing. But it can be done in a dehumanizing way. So, what I was really getting at is often people don't really take that into consideration when they are trying to convince someone, right? Because it becomes all about them. They project onto another person, oh, yeah, this problem is all about you.
Hmm.
Thomas, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this one.
Sure. Well, I do, and I actually agree. Okay, with Lady Lawrence. Okay, and what they said. So now I want to challenge a couple of things, though. What does it mean to be heard?
Mm,
It doesn't necessarily mean compliance. That's what most people want.
yeah.
You see, so when people do raise an issue, and that's why I always see that's why I always make sure that the person who wants things to change, I like working with them first. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
what do you want to change? What are you willing to lose? For real, like these are the kind of conversations that I have to have with them because I'm like, because when things start happening, I don't need the person who wants change to happen to fall apart.
Hmm.
If you're the only catalyst that's there, do you understand what I'm saying? It's like if you're
Yeah.
if you're the only catalyst that's there, I don't need you to fall apart. So the first thing is, just because you raise your voice and say something doesn't mean that someone has to do something. See, there's some entitlement there too. And
Uh-huh.
it really is true. Like there's some entitlement there too. The fact that, oh, I think something should happen just because I said something. Now let's talk about this, okay? Because I want to talk about resentment, freedom, and autonomy. Okay.
Please.
When people see other folks as autonomous or freer than them, they resent them, or that's when resentment can start to develop. So I also think that part of the reason why people see, and so this is why I'm gonna take it back because I agree with the statement. Part of the reason why people want to see change happen is because they see other people benefiting, and they're like, this needs to change. Like this, like, okay, you say you want equity, you say you want equality. Okay, well, we need this to change. What? But see, here's what the dehumanizing part, I think, to what you were saying, Enrico, happens is when people say, I want change, but they don't understand how we got here.
Yes.
So then they don't know all of the steps that it takes to get here. Like
Right.
a lot of times people do think that it is so simple that, okay, person A can just say one thing and then the whole company changes,
Yep.
you know. And now don't get me wrong, I think in some cases that can happen.
Yeah.
If you're the owner, if you're the founder, and you say this is what we're doing today, then it can happen. But guess what ends up happening? Even when that person does that, he, she, or they is probably still going to deal with a lot of conundrums
Oh,
because
yes.
we're dealing with organizations, which is people, and an organization is not. The organization is not anthropomorphic because it's made up of people. So we have to deal with people. And that's what I always tell people when dealing with individuals, that's when it gets interesting. And so if you don't know how to communicate to bring people in what you're trying to do, see, that's how you could be coming off as dehumanizing too if you're saying something. And
Right.
that's why I always like to start with reciprocity. That's
Yeah.
why I say that. I'm like, look, how do I want someone to talk to me? How do I want someone to work with me? Okay, well,
Mhm.
if I don't want someone raising their voice at me, then I'm not going to raise my voice at them.
Right.
If I want someone to give me time, like if you give me something to do, and I'm like, look, I need some time. Like, now let me put my bias. I've been in a dean position, right? So I've been in an up position. I've been in a high administrative position. See, and this is why, as a diversity professional, this is why I tell people you got to be aware because I understand my bias too, and I also understand that I'm a male. I understand
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
that I'm a man. So at times, probably when I'm speaking, people let me talk or listen because I'm a man, right? That's the society. But I'm not ashamed that I'm a man. And it's not my problem that I'm a man. It's their
Right.
problem if they can't deal with that. So that's what I understand. So I make sure that I stay open.
Mhm.
I make sure that I listen. I make sure that I ask, what would you like to see done? I make sure that I invite them in to do it with me. So if I'm not doing it in the way that you
Right.
like, then I need you to come and guide me, please.
Right.
I don't do passenger driving, just like I don't do sideline instruction. Okay,
Yeah,
and
so
I
it's
play
it's
football. I'm
it's
just
like
saying, I know that's a
calling in
sport
versus
example, but
calling
I
out.
don't do that. Yeah, no, you're gonna do something, you come in here with me. You
Right.
don't give, you see, yeah, like you're not gonna tell me what to do on the sidelines, trip about what I'm doing,
Mhm.
okay, and not help me. Oh, no, no,
Right.
that's not gonna help. And remember why? Because if it's one catalyst, and I've been the inaugural person everywhere that I've been. So when I go in there, I have to manage myself because I'm the one who gets bombarded with everyone's complaints. And I'm also the one who's gotten bombarded with everyone thinking I'm the one who has the solutions.
Right.
So that's why I always have the patient hat on. And I'm like, all right, because I know I didn't create this problem. I'm not even absorbing it. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna absorb it. I'm gonna leave it with you.
Yeah.
But I will work with you to help get this done. Why? Because I have family, I have friends outside of work. See, everything I'm saying matters. I have family outside of work. I have friends outside of work. Work does not have to be my community. And I think that's where also people struggle, is
Yeah.
because work becomes their everything. So
Right.
how do I
And it's not your
challenge?
family either.
Yeah, right. So how do I challenge that here? And that's why I made my comment before everybody got on. Remember when I said that thing about 8 hours
Oh,
being
yeah.
here? People,
Mhm.
I'm here during the best hours of my day. See, and so this is why I don't believe in victim blaming and shaming. That's not what I'm doing. I
Right.
need people to hear this. People are going to want change because they are volunteering and giving their time. No one wants to deal with injustice and deal with oppression when I'm giving you my time.
No,
No
no,
one is.
no.
Many people are not being paid what they're worth. You get paid what you negotiate. See, all of these factors matter.
Yes.
And if you want to make change in an organization, you better be willing to look at as many of those angles as you can because it's too easy to poke holes in whatever you do. And
Right.
that's why I try to bring as many people into it with me because the moment that people point out one hole, I'm like, well, you can point out another one. So let's see if we can do this together. And that's my
Yeah.
perspective on that.
No, thank you so much for that. But yeah, calling in versus calling out. So to return to that misconstrual comment that Lady Lawrence has, there's
Mhm,
a lot in this work that is easy to misconstrue. And that's why it's so important for us to build community with each other, because sometimes I might get something in my head and I might have to reach out and say, whoa. Oh, Thomas, I've been thinking about this thing this way. Can you kind of give me a little bit of a reality check? Let's share some perspective to see if we can get on the same page. I know that you've been learning a
mhm,
lot of stuff, and that's how
mhm,
we also kind of maintain that humility piece, right? And
mhm,
make sure that we're not doing the poking holes or calling out thing and
mhm,
doing more of the inviting in, the calling in, right? So like
mhm,
hell, we are working on a problem together, not you have a problem, I'm working on a different problem, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
again, so it's really easy to misconstrue a lot of things, which is why
Yep.
we've got to know who we are, what we're bringing to the table, what goals we're driving towards, and figuring out what other people are about so that we can link up
Mhm,
with them. And so, Lady Lawrence,
mhm,
thank you very much, because that is complexity is something that is really hard to negotiate in general. And when we're being harmed by something that is incredibly complex, it can be very difficult for us to sort out our feelings and to to understand if we're going in the right direction.
mhm.
Which I'm so glad that Dr. Easley, you were able to come on the show today to talk about these things with me. And
Yep.
before we go, I hope the audience doesn't mind if we run a little long. I'd like to spend a couple moments just talking about the wonderful book that you've written.
Oh, thank you. Mind Heart for Diversity.
Yeah, Miles, could we get the graphic up on the screen very quick? Thank you. That's the book cover, Mind Heart for Diversity, available at all major retailers.
Mhm.
Dr. Easley, I don't know if you've got some words about the book that you'd like to share with the audience.
Well, so yes, I do. And I know I was supposed to have the chapter pulled up, and unfortunately, because I was so excited to talk to you, I don't have the chapter pulled up, Enrico. So,
That's
but
okay. We can add it to the comments or something later.
okay, yeah, but what I can do is I just want to give people like an example, okay, of something. Because the book, I target leaders who want to do diversity. I target diversity professionals, like that's who my audience is. But anyone who is also challenged by this work. Okay, so I have a chapter in there that is called "The Advisor and the Subordinate." It's chapter 6. Okay, and I'm a former campus pastor. And I start the chapter off by telling a story about David and Bathsheba. If you're a Christian and you've, maybe read the Bible, I'm not trying to proselytize here, but I try to use all parts of me to help me either describe something to someone else or use all parts as best I can to understand what's going.
Yeah.
And in this story, David's a king. David does something wrong. Okay. And, he takes advantage of his kingship, if you will. All right. And because he's the king, he has full authority. He can do whatever he wants to do.
Right.
Okay. He can even cover it up. But what happens when someone knows that you covered it up? Okay.
Mm,
And what happens when they out it? What happens if they come and tell you, that you did it? Okay, and that's what that, and so that's how I started off explaining that. Like, okay, Nathan, this prophet, goes to David and asks him a question. This is why I tell people also being there's another word that I like to say, it's like being genuine, okay, which means that you do what you say that you're going to do. Okay,
yes.
so he basically was like, well, what would happen if someone did this? And David was like, well, this should happen to them. And then he goes, well, that's you. You did that. All right, now make it about diversity. When you're the diversity professional in a
Yeah.
place, you kind of are in two different roles, in the way that you approach it. Okay, determines what you do. You're either in a subordinate role, which you always are if you're working somewhere because you work for someone. So
Right.
you're always in that role technically, but you can also be, and it would be better for you to be in an advisor role. The
Mm,
advisor, okay, is someone who can then tell the person, okay, the leader, the dean, the CEO, or whatever, like, do it this way. I caught that you did this. Don't do that. Bring it back over here. And so then I say in the book, like, as your advisor, it's not my job to beat you down. It's
right.
not my job to make you feel like crap. It's not my job to make you feel bad, but it is my job to help you see what you're doing and maybe help you to be convicted, not not conflicted, be convicted, okay, not guilty, but convicted. Like, so, because usually when you're convicted, you want to do something about
Yeah.
it. When you're guilty, a lot of times you get stuck and then you try to remove yourself out of the bad feelings. And
Right.
so that's one of the chapters in the book that, and I also explain how to do it. So I haven't given it away, but I want people to understand that that's what I recognized about my experience. That when I was the subordinate, solely operating from that, it's hard to challenge the culture of the place that you're hired to challenge the culture. I
Yeah.
say it again. It's hard to challenge the culture of a place when you're hired to challenge the culture.
Yeah, it's that Upton Sinclair thing, right? So, like, if you're
Hmm.
being, I can't recall it off the top of my head, but basically, it's if you're asking somebody to change something, but they're being paid to do it, hey, guess what? That's not going to happen, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, yeah, thank you for leaving us with that thought. If you all want to learn more, please do pick up Thomas's book.
Please.
And this also reminds me that All Aces is actually running a free public dignity activity. It's a workshop where we explore the dynamics of oppression and racism, and we kind of simulate a bureaucratic institution. So if any of you watching would like to check that out, that is coming up on November 5th from 12 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you want to learn more about kind of how the whiteness, or how white supremacy culture kind of entered into our workplaces, and work culture has always been a part of our nation even before it was a formal country, and whiteness has kind of crept in there as well. So if you want to learn more about that, please do check out our episode with Dr. Jacqueline Batalora that is on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much once again, Thomas. I guess final question here is, what would you love to see come out of your work?
Self empowerment, plain and
Love it.
simple. That's it. Just self empowerment. Because I'm not hopeless in a world that is definitely uncertain. But and I think you and I talked about this. I'll make it fast. I'm not hopeless because I can look at how I've changed. I've changed over the last few years. Like I've shifted, I've grown, I've matured, I've been challenged, I've been checked, and I've changed for the better. That's whether it's family or friends. So right there, I'm like, okay, so I'm comfortable with the uncomfortable more and more these days. That's why I
Yeah.
love going places where I'm the only one. Like, see, I'm not bothered by that, but that's been my whole career. I've always worked in places where I'm the one and I'm the only. So self empowerment, and the reason why I say self empowerment, because I don't agree when companies, organizations say we empower people. No, you don't. But you can set up an environment for me to empower myself. That's what you can do. So
Yeah.
that's what I hope comes out of it. And the other thing that I hope that comes out of it is that people will, find ways for us all to play together. Like, to me, it's like that's the word that we're going toward. That's the word that I think that's the word that we want. We want to be
Yeah.
able to play together,
Hmm.
right? Because if I can play with you, the truth is I can argue with you then. I can
That's
argue
right.
like that's mine. Oh, it's yours. Well, I want it today. I can do that because I can play with you. And also I want to encourage people to respond not just to what's being said, to also make sure that you respond to what's being done.
Yeah.
I don't respond to ignorant comments that I hear. Like that's why comedians don't agitate me. And that's also why politicians don't either. I don't respond to that, right? I pay more attention to what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
Because I want to, like, okay, like, what are you doing? Because a lot of times when people speak, in that moment, they may not be their best selves. In that
Hmm.
moment, they may not know, or in that moment, they could be sharing something, and maybe in that moment, I'm not my best self. How about
That's
that?
right. Yeah.
So that's why I like to look and see what people are doing more so than anything.
Wow, I love it. Wow, Thomas, this has really been such a huge pleasure. Thank you so, so much for joining us. So once again, everybody, this is the one, the only Dr. Thomas RaShad Easley. He's got a great book out. He's got a wonderful consultancy, and he's got some pretty great music too. So if you'd like to check any of that out, please do click on the links that we'll have in the comments. And please be well until we see you next. Also, shout out, thank you so much to our commenters today. I really appreciated those questions, very insightful, and I loved how they drove the conversation. Thanks again, everybody. Enrico Imanalo signing off.